Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe, and our guest today is Nadya Okamoto, and she is the founder and executive director of Camions of Care. Nadia, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're thrilled to have you.
I'm thrilled to be here.
You've done some really remarkable work, and it brought a lot of attention, national attention, to this idea that feminine hygiene is a critical part of leveling the playing field for women around the world.
Yeah. Well, So I believe kind of on I truly believe it's a key to global development and breaking the cycle of poverty and advancing women all over the world, because I think of it in this formula in the way of, if global development is here, that really depends on women's empowerment through education and economic purpose. And women and girls can't take full advantage of empowering that unless menstrual hygiene is addressed.
How did you come across this as an issue?
So my family experienced legal homelessness from my freshman to sophomore year of high school a couple years ago. And through that process, I had a lot of conversations with homeless women on my way to school, and in a weekend that I actually spent at a battered women's shelter in Portland, Oregon. And while I was there, just really hearing these stories of using stolen pillowcases, toilet paper, most commonly brown paper grocery bags, to absorb menstrual blood. And from there, I knew that it was a problem in the United States, and in hearing their stories, realizing that I had the potential to do something about it. And then later on, I did more research and learned that it was the #1 reason why girls miss school in developing countries. And it was the single event that led to girls dropping out of school, girls getting married, and undergoing female genital mutilation and social isolation. And so kind of through this catalyst of my own personal realization that it was need in the States, was kind of how I realized it was a global issue.
Nadia, how do you think that women, I'm trying to understand what was going on, that women weren't having access to hygiene products. Was it just that their money was too thin to cover that? What do you see as the fundamental problem there, and how are you addressing it?
Well, I think it really starts because there's a stigma around menstruation that often labels it as dirty and something that girls talk about, either keeps to themselves or you only talk about it with other girls. It's not a comfortable topic to talk to people about. It's also not always looked at as a priority. So when we think, Devin, if I were saying, you have money and you're going to donate it to the homeless population in the US, what do you think they need? You think of clothes, you think of food, you think of housing, you think of water, but you don't think of periods, and you don't think of menstrual blood. So it's not really prioritized. And also, because of the stigma, actually a lot of the nonprofits we start working with, they often don't provide feminine hygiene products, either due to that lack of funds or a lack of displayed need, because women themselves are afraid to go forward and say, I need pads and tampons for my period. And on a global scale, I think it's the same thing, is you have a certain allocation of resources and menstrual hygiene is not always prioritized, or it's culturally looked at as something that isn't a natural need, but rather holds this cultural significance of a girl becoming a woman.
Now, improvised solutions seem to me to have not just unappealing aspects to them, but they seem to me to be health risks. Are you seeing any evidence that women who don't have adequate access to these resources are suffering adverse consequences?
Absolutely. So most commonly here in the States, it's usually around skin irritation, a lot of infections that come from not using clean materials, especially using brown paper grocery bags or materials found on the ground. A lot of women can contract diseases from that. On a global scale, it can be even more serious because there's a lack of access to clean water. And so when you use reusable products or when you're washing yourself, you're often not using clean water. And actually in places like India, poor menstrual hygiene causes 70% of reproductive diseases. And those effects can go so far as to affect maternal mortality. And also like reproductive tract infections. A lot of them are plausibly affected by poor menstrual hygiene. And toxic shock syndrome, that's a universal thing. You can contract that even with even if you're affluent and wealthy and you just leave your tampon in for too long. So there's kind of this lack of education around what it means to have adequate menstrual hygiene. And because of that misinformation and this lack of education, there are health consequences.
So you've raised the issues of the developing world. What are the other issues you see as you look at problems related to this in the developing world?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is like the effect of it, of getting your period. Like menarche is the word for your first period, and how that like greatly celebrates this amazing transition from a girl being a girl to a girl being a woman. And it's this beautiful thing, but oftentimes what that means in a culture is that it's now time for the girl to be a woman who's a mother and a wife. So you drop out of school, you become a full-time house employee, you get married, you start getting ready to have kids. And often your sexuality is now, something can become of your sexuality because you can get pregnant now. And so that often leads to cultural practices of social isolation and female genital mutilation. And that's a big problem in some cultures because like social isolation is really deeply embedded into the culture, and with a strong belief that when a girl is menstruating, she's either like treated as a microbe. So in places like rural Nepal, she'll be sent to a hut in rural, like in the back, and isn't allowed to touch the ground and has to be crouching the whole time. Or some places in India, you're sent and you're in this dark room and you can't touch other men or other women, and you can't like eat around other people. Or in some rural, like nomadic Maasai villages in East Africa, like you can't touch cows and goats because you might contaminate the animal for other people's to eat. So I think that on a developing scale, like everywhere in the world, periods signify that transition, but in some places in that world, what that transition leads to is really detrimental for the educational and economic advancement of a girl.
It's scary stuff. I was visiting with Celeste Mergens, who I think is the woman who runs a nonprofit. Anyway, it escapes me, and I apologize. But she was telling me that some girls in Africa told her when she began providing them with feminine hygiene products that they were being essentially raped or coerced into providing sexual favors in exchange for feminine hygiene products. I just thought, what a tragic trade-off these poor girls are being forced to make. This is just an incredibly important issue. So tell me a little bit about what you and your organization are doing to help address these issues.
Yeah, so I started Camions of Care 2 years ago with my co-founder Vincent Forand, who is a good friend and good classmate at Catlin Gable. And I went up to him one day and I was like, we got to do something. Let me explain to you what a period is and let's get started. And so Camions of Care is now a youth-run global nonprofit that manages and celebrates menstrual hygiene through advocacy, youth leadership, and service, primarily through pathways: the global distribution of feminine hygiene product care packages and the engagement of youth leadership through a nationwide network of campus chapters. So in the last 2 years, our network of about 2,200 volunteers through 40 nonprofit partners in 17 states and 9 countries has addressed over 22,000 periods. And we've engaged 35 chapters at different universities and high schools around the United States.
Fantastic. Well, it's amazing the work that you're doing. And because of the great work that you're doing, you're becoming a real role model. Your TED Talk is impressive, and 1,000 people have watched that. The young women in your organization certainly look up to you as a leader. Who do you look up to as a role model?
Let's see. I think that something that has made my motivations and success possible is the fact that I have so many role models. And I have role models that I've never met before, and I have role models that I hold really close to me. So I guess I'll name 3, if that's all right with you, Devin. I think first and foremost, it's my mom. My mom taught me how to be an activist and advocate from day one, either teaching me that over the dinner table or showing by example and standing up for people we met on the street. And also just kind of reflecting and realizing like she had this crazy career as a corporate lawyer, and then when I was about 9 and my parents divorced, she like left it for nonprofit management, and like really to follow her passions with writing and like giving back to the community. And although it took like a hit to our family, like financial well-being, it was something that she did because she believed in it, and that means a lot to me, and I think it taught me a lot. Secondly, I would say one of my greatest mentors is this woman named Heidi O'Neill, who I connected with through my school. She's the president of global retail at Nike, and I got to shadow her this past May. But she's one of my greatest role models because she really shows me what it means to be like a mom and like this leader and this boss lady, like crazy, amazing woman who leads through compassion and connects with other people and inspires the people who work around her. And then lastly, Wendy Davis, who I'll actually get to shadow at the Democratic National Convention next week. And she just inspires me for how she's overcome adversity, and really used the platform of politics to make a difference, especially in the realm of women's rights and reproductive rights.
Oh, that's great. Great role models, all three. Now, you are, we like to get a great tip, an impact hack from all of our guests. And certainly you are doing incredible things. Off to Harvard in the fall. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
And so we're excited about you. But tell us a little bit, give us one impact hack from your life and experience that we can all employ to do more good.
Let's see. I would say that my one impact hack that I don't think gets said enough is that you have to learn how to delegate. Because when you really want to make an impact, you want to think of it in a full picture. Like, I don't want to just speak. I don't want to just be speaking about the issue, but I want to be doing something about it, and I want to manage it, and I want to grow it, and that means doing finances and business and doing the back end and dealing with the IRS and like all of these tasks that I am usually maybe not strong at, or I'm not great at. So a lot of it is you have to learn how to identify your strengths. Know what you're passionate about and how you can help that through your strengths. But that means identifying your weaknesses and collaborating with people who are good at those things and working in collaboration with them to maximize the impact of your venture.
Fantastic. Well, Nadia, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. Before you go, I want to ask you to tell people how they can learn more about Camions of Care and how they can connect with you personally.
So connecting with me personally is really easy. You can either email me at nadia.okamoto@camionsofcare.com. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Nadya Okamoto. To find out more about the organization, you can visit www.camionsofcare.org. You can follow us on Facebook. We are constantly updating our Facebook with cool things about menstrual hygiene and why you should care about it, and volunteering events that we have coming up, and different social media campaigns and collaborations we're working on. So really follow us on Facebook. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Camions of Care. And you can watch our promo video on YouTube. Just type in Camions of Care and it'll pop up.
Fantastic. Well, again, Nadia, we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us this afternoon. And we wish you every success in providing feminine hygiene products to all those who need it in the world.
Thank you so much, Devin. I appreciate it.
All righty. Let's do some good.
Thank you.